Yesterday, when I presented, the question came up about the size of nukes and success. And I said that Fanny Hachina had presented. Well, here's the abstract from it. The brief version is she tested several different sizes. And both the queen mating and the performance of the colonies was larger from the larger size nukes. So she did fractionally, she did one half. I guess she started with a full box. It's not clear. You know, a single box. She did half size, quarter size, and 1/8 size mating nukes. And the larger nukes had better performance. The other thing you should be aware of, I saw up in Canada a few days ago, presentation by Marta Guarna, where she heat and cold stressed queen bees and then put them out into colonies and then tracked the performance of those colonies for the season. And the unstressed the colonies from unheat-stressed and cold-stressed queens way outperformed any that had gotten heat or cold stress. So if you're getting shipped queens that have gone through the mail, any heat or cold stress really can hamper their performance. Okay, so every year at our county fair, we have a booth with 2 observation hives in it. And we have plastic tubes going up to the roof, and the bees free fly over everybody's head. So thousands of people at the fair, the bees fly over their heads, and nobody notices the bees. But everybody says, oh my God, I'm sure glad they're behind glass. It looks dangerous. So that's a misconception that you have to be protected from bees. So I built a screened cage with black screen, a hexagonal cage, about 8 feet apart, across, 10 feet high. So that we put a colony of bees in there in the middle of the fairgrounds, and the bees fly out over the top and in and out. And then I can step into the cage, or somebody can step in there once a day, and we open up the hive right in front of people, and I can put the frame right up to their face with the screen between, and they can take a look. And they can watch somebody open up a hive with no gear on and inspect the frames, show the kids the queen and everything. It's a whole different experience for the public than seeing bees protected from them by glass. Because now they go, wow, behind glass, they're still afraid of bees. Once they see this, the public loses their fear of bees. So it's a very good public relations for beekeepers to do this. Now, one of the questions they ask almost every time is, why aren't the bees attacking you? And I say, well, for the same reason that you aren't. Okay? I said, you guys are far more of a threat to me. If I were to grab one of your kids, I might get killed. There's no way in the world this colony of bees is going to kill me. So you are way more dangerous to me than these bees are. But you got to understand that all animals, now this animal right here is the epitome of 7,000 years of selective breeding of wolves by humans. We have, after 7 years of selective breeding, we have turned the wolf into this animal right here. But if you trigger the response threshold, the thresh threshold, it turns right back into a wolf. All animals will, when they have a response threshold to threat, they will defend themselves. What you want to understand as a beekeeper are the cues that the bees recognize as threats that make them think that they have a predator coming after them. So if you approach your bees like this, they will feel threatened and they will respond appropriately. So the trick is, don't ever make the bees feel threatened. In all my beginners classes, the first class they show up with veils on, and usually the second class nobody even has a veil on, and nobody wears gloves in any of my beginners classes, because they see how to handle bees. The last thing in the world you ever want to do is to learn beekeeping from anybody who wears heavy leather gloves and full gear on. I get in the car. I don't want to be near that person, okay? Because I know that they're going to be brutal on their bees because they don't know how to handle bees. So what you want to do is understand which cues actually trigger that defensive response. What do bees recognize as a threat? So the first thing to do is understand that bees are not human beings. They do not experience the world the way that you do. They do not realize that they are in a man-made hive. As far as the bees are concerned, they're still in a hollow tree. They do not realize that you are a human being or a beekeeper or that you are even alive. They don't recognize you. None of that, okay? So get all that out of your mind, okay? What they have to do, and they don't see the world as you do. They see in a different spectrum. They have a whole different vision of the world. So don't assume that they recognize you as a human being in any way or a threat. Now, so if a colony feels threatened, they're going to look for the threat. Do they start stinging trees and rocks? No. So somehow they differentiate between you and trees and rocks. So the question is, how do they differentiate you from a tree? You probably think, what's the first one? First cue?
Smell.
No. First cue? Movement. The trees don't move. And now, if your movement is swaying like a tree, they're not going to sting you. If your movement is like an animal, then they recognize that as a threat. So they have to decide if you are a threat or a non-threat. The other thing is people say, oh, well, my bees recognize me. Well, the average longevity of a worker bee is about 35 days. So unless you're inspecting your colony every month, there's not a bee alive that's going to recognize you, okay? So your colony doesn't get to know you. What they did is honeybees evolved with the worst predators they have were the mammalian predators. Fast-moving, dark-haired usually, mammalian predators, of which humans are one of them. So that is what they specifically respond to. So the cues you want to avoid giving them are rapid movement, dark color, that's why we wear white jackets, mammal hair, we'll show pictures of this, any kind of jarring or jolting, an animal tearing in, because jarring and jolting doesn't normally happen in a tree cavity unless something's trying to dig into it. And then of course, way down there, mammal set, presence of eyes and breath. We'll cover all these in a minute. Let's first talk about protective gear, because people go, Randy, you don't wear gear? And I go, well, rarely do I put any gear on when I'm working bees. In order to survive, honeybees have coexisted with human beings in the environment for very long. Human beings are the most dangerous predator to honeybees because they can actually go into tree cavities with saws and axes and kill the colony. So the only colonies that survived were those that were able to deter human beings. They found out the most effective place if they're going to sacrifice their life by stinging, is to put that stinger in your face, generally to the eye. Also the nose, the ear, and the lip are the most painful spots. I've been stung thousands of times, or tens of times on my body, hundreds of times on every part of my body, bar none. And I can tell you the most painful places are all above the neck. A person who's not yet immune to bee venom reacts typically like this. So if you're starting off, if you're going to be dumb about it, better be tough, because this is what is going to happen to you on your first few stings. Once you build up an immunity to bee venom, then you don't swell up anymore and you don't itch anymore. So the sooner you build up that immunity, the more pleasant beekeeping is. Because if you're a beekeeper, you will get stung at some time. So first, the best advice, and I don't give advice, but some good advice is just simply wear a veil until you have built up that immunity. So get your stings in your hands and arms and stuff to build up immunity before you start taking that veil off. And then always make sure you protect your visitors, especially your neighbors. The last thing you want to do is to have your neighbors ever get stung while you're there. So this would be like a first beginner's class where I make sure everybody has a veil on. I pass out veils to everybody. And then it's up to them when they decide to take it off. The one thing, if you have neighbors next door, the best way to win their approval of you being a beekeeper is on a nice, warm, sunny day with a nectar flow on, invite them over and show them the queen bee and the brood and that kind of stuff, and they're going to be on your side forever. They're going to love your bees. One thing you don't want to do is have them walk over when you're in full gear and they get stung in the eye. While they're looking at you, wow, you're in full gear and you let me walk over there? If you are working bees and you are wearing a veil and anybody approaches, you stop what you're doing and you just say, leave, or you take your veil off and put it on them. Don't ever let anybody watching without a veil watch you working bees if you have a veil on, okay? You have a responsibility to protect your viewers and you don't want to piss off your neighbors. I hate wearing a veil because you can't see the queen, spot the queen, you can't see eggs very well. The veil really disrupts your vision of being able to see things. So I can spot a queen 3 times faster than anybody else who has a veil on, simply because I don't have a veil on. So what I find, and most US beekeepers now have gone to these light jacket with a flip-up hood. So you can, if you start get some warning bumps off of bees, you just go flip it over your face, a little bit of smoke, let them calm down, and then you flip it back. So that gives you the option of taking the veil on and off very, very quickly, very, very handy. And then there are times when you get a very defensive colony, and full gear is necessary at that point. So you want to dress appropriately for this situation. Here are my sons making nukes on a cold, slightly rainy day, so they'll wear full gear then. Or you might want to do something, a publicity stunt, and show how gentle bees can be. This guy had somewhere around 80 pounds of bees. They put 30 queens on cages all over his body, and then shook the bulk bees to show how many bees you can get on a human being. Don't try that if you're a beginner, by the way. Okay. Now, if you're a beginner, you may want to start out with full gear, but I would skip the leather gloves. Leather gloves make you really, really clumsy, and you learn terrible technique because you can squash bees with your thumb, and you don't realize that you're squashing bees. You want to learn not to squash bees, and you can't learn that with heavy gloves on. So I would skip the gloves as soon as you can. Now, the other thing is, I'm assuming everybody in here is or wants to be a beekeeper. Bees sting. That's a fact. So get used to it. So instead of trying to deny that fact that you're going to get stung, just say, hey, wow, I might as well get my dose of bee venom today. And I was even saying that right now because I haven't been stung for a couple of days. I couldn't get him. I tried getting a bee to sting me out in the yard 2 days ago at Rogers, and the damn thing would not sting me. Because if I don't get my dose of bee venom every couple of days, when I talk about that, I break out in goosebumps going, my body says, wow, you haven't been stung for a couple of days, dude. You better get some bee venom. So people pay for bee venom therapy. Your immune system comes into tune with a regular dose of bee venom. So instead of trying to deny that and avoid it, say, yeah, that's just part of being a beekeeper. You're going to get stung. So you can learn technique by the most patient teachers, and those are the honeybees. So if you make movements or do things that are a cue for defensive behavior, they'll let you know. Boom, you get a sting, and just quick scrape it out and go, okay, I won't do that again. And I find you get much quicker training of human beings instead of positive reward with negative reward. Usually use positive reward for training animals, but it's much easier to train animals than it is to train beekeepers. So the negative reward, which means a sting, is very quick for training. So if you work barehanded and you keep getting stung, if you are trainable, you will learn, oh, if I don't do this, I won't get stung. So a very easy way to do it. And my beginners, I said, well, you're looking to get about 200 stings a year. That will prevent you from eventually getting anaphylactic shock from bees. And so we have our beginners class, and they're all working. They'll holler out, oh, Randy, only 199 to go. And they're ready for that. They accept it. Now, if the conditions are cold, windy, something like that, you can wear nitrile gloves. The 5mm nitrile gloves are a good option because you can still feel a bee. If you pinch it on the frame, you can lift your finger off. It will eliminate about 90% of the stings, but you will get maybe the occasional one. So nitrile gloves are a good option. I like the ones with the 12-inch cuffs. That way, if you're wearing a jacket, the jacket overlaps the cup, and you don't get stings right around your wrist right there. So if we're working in cold weather, here we're making nukes on a snowy day, and people ask me, don't the bees get chilled? You've never seen how fast we work, okay? Those frames are only out for seconds, and then they're tucked back into a nuke box. So we are able to work rapidly. So you just put on your gear and do the job. Avoid tight clothing. Bees can't sting through loose clothing because there's a space there. But if you're, especially with ladies who wear these tight pants these days, you get stuck through tight clothing. If you're going to work at night, now we avoid ever touching a hive after the sun goes down. When we're migratory beekeepers, we load thousands of colonies up and move them around. We want to put our last hive onto the truck at dusk as the last foragers are coming back to the hive. And then we don't touch them until morning when the sun is up, and then we will unload them. Touching a hive of bees anytime when it's dark is you're just asking for trouble. The other thing is bravery has nothing to do with this. Being brave around bees is stupid, okay? Dress appropriately. If you're not comfortable, if you're not skilled enough to handle bees without eliciting a defensive response, then wear more gear until you learn that. So it's not about being brave, it's about being confident with your bees. These are two pictures I took back when I was in my 20s, okay? And I had a World War II veteran, Ed Heller, and I sold him his bees, and he came out girded for battle. Duct tape around the ankles, the full boots, the gloves, and all that. He was taking the military approach. And at the same time, I had learned by that time that a hot day, why wear a bunch of clothes? Just learn how to deal with your bees, okay? So two different ways of looking at it. And when I say this is the adversarial approach of beekeeping, and this is the respectful approach, where you respect your bees, you learn what cues them to feel threatened, and you avoid giving them those cues. So here'd be a picture of adversarial approach. You can see how the bees are responding to these non-respectful beekeepers right here. And this would be me and my sons out on a large field trial. So we'll be opening up, I think that was 144 hives that we had to go through that day. And I wear my protective gear right here, keeps the sun off my head. Every beginner's class, I offer them on the first lesson, I shake bees into a tub, let the older bees fly off. The remaining bees in the tub are all young bees that don't want to sting. And I say, would somebody like to feel what bees feel like? And I scoop up a double handful of bees and put it inside their hands. And they go, wow, that feels so cool. They're warm, they're vibration. And then next thing I know, everybody's got their hands out. And the whole class has all held a handful of bees. That changes, that's a paradigm shift for most people in the class. They just change their everything once they get over that fear. And I get that out of the way fairly quickly. And from that point on, they learn beekeeping without that fear built in there. There are tricks to doing that. Don't try that unless, talk to me if you want to know what the tricks of how to get them into their hands without them getting stung. There's little tiny details. So one advantage that you have over the honey badger and bears is you have the smoker. When the smell of smoke tells bees what? Evolutionarily, what would it tell the bees?
Fire.
Fire, where? Upwind, meaning it's approaching you. So if they smell smoke, that means they are in imminent danger of a forest fire reaching them. So European bees, the queen is too heavy to fly at a moment's notice, so she's going to stay. The job of any other bee in the hive, all her daughters, are to protect mom. So they gorge, they give up defensive response, they gorge on honey to get reserves in their body, get thermal mass, and they cluster down around the queen to protect her from the oncoming fire. We call that gentling of the bees. There's no gentling of the bees. They've just changed their behavior to fire survival behavior from defensive behavior. Now, the one thing I've noticed is that it's a total different response to white smoke and gray smoke, lighter smoke. Lighter smoke does not elicit any much of a behavioral change. So if my smoker starts to go gray instead of white smoke, I just stop what I'm doing. If you have to unload the smoker, start over again, do it. But I will not proceed without white smoke. And I use very, very little smoke, but I want to use white smoke, cool white smoke. You're out in the yard. The bees are going to look for any moving object. And what they do, they have learned evolutionarily to go to the top of that moving object, because that is the best place to place a sting if you want to deter that moving object. So be aware of that. Here's my son out here making a perfect threat because of the dark shirt, and if he wasn't standing still for the picture, he would be moving. The bees will often then be very polite and send a little notice by giving you warning bumps. So I stepped out of the truck to this yard, and before I even got near the hives, you can see here's a bee here and here's a bee here, and they're sending out the greeting team with a couple of warning bumps. They don't sting, but they come up and they bounce off you and they say, they die if they sting. So if they can give you a warning bump and say, oh, maybe you might want to think about turning around and going somewhere else, dude, okay, that's good. And you can either ignore that and go into it, or you can say, well, either maybe I shouldn't be working them right now, or maybe I should come back tomorrow, or go ahead and put a veil on. And in that case, I will go dig behind the truck seat and try to find a veil. Now, if they're circling your head, remove your face from the top of the moving object. Just bend down like this. And now the bees will be around your shoulders instead, and you'll walk away. Okay, very easy way to get the bees out of your face. Just put your face down below being the top of the moving object. Another thing you can do if you don't want to get stung in the eye, and the only threat of getting stung in the eye is that on very rare occasions, the stinger will penetrate your eyelid and you can scratch your cornea. besides it being painful. So you can simply wear safety glasses if you want to have a better view and don't want to wear a veil. We deal a lot with hot weather, which you guys don't do. So putting on full gear, we have several times had helpers who were not ready to work with that much gear, seriously get hurt by heat stroke, okay, working out in the hot weather. So to us, the risk is far more of heat stroke than it is of getting stung by bees, okay? So here's my son Ian, and you can see a warning bump coming in, and that bee will bounce right off his forehead and let him know, hey, we need a little bit of smoke or something. No sunglasses. Bees are trained to go for eyes. If you want to test this out, put on a white t-shirt, take a felt pen, make 2 eye spots here, and they kick that hive. And you see where those bees are going to sting you. They go straight for the eyes. So no sunglasses, no dark wristwatches, and like that when you are working bee. That dark round spot against lighter skin will draw the bees. Here's my son Eric next to me, and I just piss him off all the time because the two of us walk side by side through the bee yard, and he's always going to get like 5 times as many warning bumps or stings as I will. I don't think it's an odor. I haven't noticed an odor about him, but I think it's just he has dark hair and I have light hair. And then if you have longer hair, especially longer dark hair, or a curly beard, that's rough. The bees really go for curly beards. But if you have long hair, when you lean forward and that moving hair is next to your face, that's going to draw bees. So for ladies or men who have long dark hair, put a scarf over it to hold it back. That would prevent much of that attracting the bees towards your face. This, by the way, is this is Ray Oliveras, who's one of the major good friend, one of the major queen producers in the world, actually. Now, approach that hive with the understanding that you're about to invade the bee's inner sanctum. Be respectful to that invasion. One of the things is bees will fly out all the time, and if you're near the hive, they'll be confused by the change of landmarks. They're going to land on your clothing. That's no big deal. I have bees landing on my face, and my hair, my ears, on my arms all the time. People go, aren't you concerned about those bees landing on you? I said, no. They have not identified me as a threat in any way. They just landed on me. But then they often will walk uphill to take off. And if you have a funnel in the form of a shirt right here, they're going to walk inside your shirt. So always tuck your shirt in. Make sure you don't have holes. I was pairing a pair of jeans the other day that had holes in the knee, and I kept getting bees walking into the hole. Then they get up here, and then they get pressed against when you move your leg. Your trousers press against them. So cover up holes. If a bee gets in your veil, don't freak out. If you're looking at its back, it's trying to get out. If it wanted to sting you, it would have already stung you. Okay, so a bee in your veil is no big deal. Just unzip your veil, let it just fly out to the light. Now, if you get a bee in your hair, if they land on your hair and they're just walking around, that is of no concern whatsoever. But if instead you feel that bee starting to dig and make a high-pitched buzz, that bee is now a kamikaze bee. It is not going to be content until it has planted its stinger into somebody. So if you do this and flip it out of your hair, it's going to fly right over to your friend next door and sting him in the eye, and that person has the right to punch you in the nose because you put the kamikaze bee out there. So what we do, if you get a bee in your hair, if it's just in your hair, that's no big deal. If it is the high-pitched buzz, you reach up, you gently locate it, you go very quick pinch, and then throw it away to get that alarm pheromone away from your body. You now will have alarm pheromone on your fingertips. Generally, you can do it without getting alarm pheromone in your hair, but we usually do a puff of white smoke on your hair, and then alarm pheromone dissipates in about 5 minutes, so be careful of your fingers when you do that. But just very quickly get that bee, just pinch it and out of your hair. Or ask somebody else to do it. My helpers generally just ask me, hey, Randy, can you get this bee out of my hair? I hear that all the time. If you get a bee inside your clothing, you think, oh, I'll just crush it in my clothing. Well, the first thing to understand, if you have a bee in your clothing, if it wanted to sting you, it would have already stung you. Okay? If you feel it moving around, it's just trying to get out. It's not trying to threaten you in any way. So the moment you try crushing it, you increase your chances by about 400-fold of it actually stinging you because you're pressing against it. So what you do is you just open up your shirt or turn from the audience, open up your pants, whatever, and let the bee fly out to light. And they just want to get out of your clothing. Otherwise, they would have already stung you. So they're just trying to get out. Now, if you get a bee in your ear, that may be distracting. Now, what I found for most beekeepers, you can go up to the opposite ear and go and get a good puff, and it'll blow that bee right out the other ear. Okay? Now, there are a few beekeepers that have some kind of mass between their two ears. I don't know what it is. So for those, if you mess around with it, you're more likely to get stung than just leaving it in your ear. If you do, this is when, this guy now, he was not a beginner. He is now the sheriff for the state of California in charge of any bee thefts. And this is him during a training session at my house years ago. And my son said, hey, I just got this brand new Leatherman pliers for my birthday, and they have it, and it looks, they're skinny. Let me try them out. So he was able to extract the bee with that. But it's tricky. So you really need something skinny. You cannot do it with your fingers. So first, worked smoothly in delivery. This is Tiffany Bates from Australia, visited me some years ago. She was skilled at handling bees. She's doing everything wrong what the books say. She's got a dark shirt on. She's got a red on her. Everything you would think would cause her to get stung. But she knows how to handle those bees, and she doesn't get stung. The trick is always watch the bees and see whether they are watching you. That's the most important thing I can say. Always look at the bees before you reach down. If they're looking at you, they are aware of you. You don't ever want your bees to be aware of you. So in the hive, there's bees with different jobs in the hive. There's the drones, which you don't have to worry about. There's the queen. But then there's all these workers. The workers go through this temporal polyethism, which means changing of tasks over time. They start off as cleaners, then they do nursing duty, producing jelly, then honey processors, building combs. Then they typically go to being guards, and then shift from guards to being foragers. But they also act as soldiers. Soldiers are bees between nursing and foraging that don't fly. They just hang out as a reserve force, like the Army Reserve, on the combs, waiting for the cue to go out and defend the colony. So they can be very old, but there's no tattering on their wings because they haven't flown. So they're just reserved. So the soldier bees are ones that very few books talk about. A brand new paper just came out on the soldier bees, but Gene Robinson identified these many years ago about soldier bees. And I've been wanting to do some experiments with marking on the soldier bees. We should have. I'm surprised how few researchers have followed up on the original finding about soldier bees. Come on, there we go. Now, pay especially attention to the guard bees. Guard bees are the only bees that stand on 4 legs. All the rest stand on 6 legs. So guard bees have their front legs up. They have their wings cocked instead of back like this, and they're the only bees whose heads will follow your movement. So if you're moving, they're going to follow you like watching a ping pong match, okay? They'll be very much aware of the guard bees. I did an interesting thing. We tagged 6,000 bees a couple of years ago for a experiment, glued metal tags on them. We shook bees into a tub, let the old bees fly out, and then we'd pick up the bees remaining, which would be young bees, and glued tags on them. Put them back in, they'd all be on the combs, and then we wouldn't see any of them anywhere near the entrance or flying for several days. And then you go out one day, and the landing board would be all tagged bees, crazy. That was their first day when they moved from nursing duties down to guarding duties. And then after a couple of days, you didn't see any more. They were all out foraging then. But the whole cohort just amazes how they would all transition from one job to the next at the same time. And then there's the soldiers that just sit idle on the combs. Now, the guards were on the periphery of the hive. So there's no need to smoke the center of the combs. You smoke anywhere on the periphery. That's where the guards go. And they will then release alarm pheromones which will alert the soldiers. So what you want to do is really pay attention to these guards, the ones who are watching you. And back in the United States, when we, back with Dick Cheney, we had these warnings every morning. What's our alert level for terror attacks, okay? Well, it's the same with the bees. All these different factors here can make them more on edge before you ever even approach the colony. So be aware of the genetics. If you're in Southern California and Africanized bees, they're going to be more edgy bee, more defensive bee. If it's a cloudy, rainy, or windy day, they're going to be more on edge. If there's been robbing, they're going to be more on edge. Avoid ever opening a colony twice in one day. And the third time, and unfortunately in research, I often have to open a colony 3 or 4 times in one day. And I may have to put a veil on by the time I get to opening 3 or opening 4. They're very permissive of you going in once, but they don't like to be opened a second time in a day. Then I see beekeepers come up and they go, oh, let me put my smoker down, clank on top of the hive. No, no jarring on the hive at all. No working on top of the hive in preparation. That vibration will put them on edge before you ever get in there. Multiple hive stands, dumb, 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 for a couple of reasons. First thing, 2 hives side by side, you can stand to the side and reach out and grab frames like this. If you have 3 side by side, then you got to go around here, and now you got to grab a frame like this. This is ergonomically awkward. Never put more than 2 hives side by side. You always want to be able to stand to one side or the other of a hive. The second thing, if you have hive stand, these transmit vibration. So if you're working this hive, all the vibrations in this hive alert all the rest of the hive that attack is imminent. Okay? So I always we want our hives to be on individual stands, just a concrete block, 8-inch block works very well. 2 hives side by side, but never ever on a stand. And then people say, Randy, you work really quick, but you look like you're doing Tai Chi. And I said, well, yeah, I did have years of martial arts training, and I learned how to move my body smoothly. So I work quickly, but I work very smoothly, and I pay attention to the bees responding to my movements, to the warning bumps, and I can tell exactly the speed I need to work at. So if I'm working with Africanized bees, I'll open it up, and then all of a sudden you see, oh, they're starting to fly around, you know, the wings start moving, they're more active. I slow down a notch. I just keep working, but I work 1 notch slower, and then all that defensive response disappears. Here we are putting oxalic acid dribble. During the winter, snow on the ground, we'll do hundreds of hives a day. We don't wear protective gear if you just learn how to move. Bees can't see red, if it's black to them. If you have wool socks on, the bees, when they fly out, if they feel disturbed, they'll ignore your head, everything else. They go straight to this, what looks like a black band. They'll smell mammal hair, the wool, and then they'll sting the skin nearest. You'll wind up with a ring of stings right around your 2 ankles and nowhere else in your body. So be aware of the clothing that you wear. Wool socks are not a good idea. Now the biggest thing is to keep and breed gentle stock. So that's what we have a reputation for, is our bees are very gentle. We have a 0 tolerance policy for defensive hives. We have a piece of yellow crayon, and we just write H-O-T on top of that hive. That's a death sentence for that queen. We have no tolerance at all for any colonies that sting. Then know when colonies are likely to be defensive. When a swarm first lands, all the bees are full of honey or nectar for reserves. And they don't carry very much. People who say, oh, the swarm takes a bunch of honey. No. If you do the calcs, they take very little honey from a hive when they swarm. But they're jealous pussycats. You can go to a newly landed swarm and take your hand and slowly work it through the whole swarm and out the other side without getting stung. Okay? Don't do it unless you're experienced. But if you come back 3 days later when they've used up those reserves, they can be hotter than a firecracker. So be aware. Don't just think every swarm is going to be gentle. I came home from a trip to Slovenia this spring, came in, drove down the driveway and looked at it and said, what's that brown thing on the tree? And it was a fair-sized swarm right there. It actually, when I shook this off into boxes of drawn comb, Langstroth boxes, it filled 3.5 boxes solid overnight. So that's well over 100,000 bees right there. Nothing to be afraid of. And when I shook them off, I was dressed just like this, just, you know, and thousands of bees around me, but there was no reason for them to sting because I didn't give them a cue. Getting shaken off a branch does not elicit defensive response. If there's a nectar dearth out, this is typical California during late summer from July on. There's nectar dearth. And there's robbing, so bees will be more defensive. If you got robbing going in the yard, the robbers are not defensive. I walked into we had a big robbing event at the honey house a couple weeks ago. I walked on in, and I couldn't hardly even inhale because there's so many bees, thousands of bees flying around me, but there was 0 stinging whatsoever. So very impressive of somebody who's not used to bees. I had a friend watching, my God, man, you're walking into that cloud of bees. You know, you can't talk, you can't open your mouth, there's so many, but there's no stinging at all. But the bees in that hive that are getting robbed, they will be defensive. The robbers are not defensive. And if we pull up to a yard where the shade is shifted and the bees are in the shade, oh man, get behind the seat of the truck, dig out that veil, because we hate getting to the yard when there's shade on the colonies. Try to work your bees when there's sun on the colonies. If there's shade, they're always going to be more defensive. You have wasps at the entrance, okay? That will put the colony on edge. Now, work your hives when the older bees are out foraging, so they'll be much less defensive when the older bees are out. If you have poor brood rearing, where you now have an age shift, now you have a colony full of older bees rather than younger bees. So you can see here, this is a queen who's failing with sperm and it's become a drone layer. So here's the queen's abdomen here, but the drone cells. If you were to shake these bees into a tub, instead of half the bees remaining in the tub as young bees, every single bee will fly out. It's a colony full of older bees. Instead of younger bees, will be a much more defensive colony than a colony rearing brood. Here's a huge trick for you. So we make about 3,000 nukes every spring in an assembly line, very efficient. We always, if you're working a hot colony, say you want to find the queen in a hot colony or you're making a nuke, don't ever work at the parent stand. You pick your boxes up, move them 20 feet away, and any bee that's going to sting immediately flies back to the parent stand, and you can work those bees with no problem at all away from the parent stand. So my one son here, he has to have full gear on, because they will be defensive at the parent stand. All the older bees fly back there. He brings the boxes one after the other, and we do this very quick. He has a constant stream of boxes coming to us as we make our nukes. We knock out nukes at the rate of about 1 a minute, okay, when we're making nukes, very, very quick. And we can work over here without gear on because we don't have any older bees there. Especially handy if you're trying to requeen a hot colony. Always move it away from the parent stand. And then certain nectars will make bees pissy. I don't know if you have any here in this country, but many countries have a certain nectar that will make the bees pissy. In the almonds, the almonds initially produce pollen, and then they produce nectar. When they're producing pollen, the bees are gentle as pussycats. As soon as you're working the almond nectar, you can't even walk down the road without having bees sting you, because they get very, very, go beyond defensive to clear aggressive when they have the almond nectar. The amygdalin apparently in the almond nectar makes them very, very defensive. And then alarm pheromone changes the game completely. You want to avoid and be aware of any alarm pheromone. If you smell alarm pheromone, slow down, just stop moving until the alarm pheromone dissipates. Helpers. Oh, my sons, people come from all over and want to visit and help us out. And my sons go, oh no, Dad, not another helper. Because one helper can ruin your day. We're just working away, going through a yard of bees, and one helper makes a mistake, and then we have to say, stop, go to the truck, let's all pull out our protective gear. Because of that helper helping us, okay? So we have if you want to get yelled at, come on over to my place and try being a helper. And you will very quickly learn what not to do. Okay, again, focus on the guard bees, the ones with their front legs up right here. Guards are mainly on the periphery. You don't have to engulf the center of the colony with smoke. And these books that say, oh, take out all the frames of a hive one by one in both boxes and look at them, we would never, ever do that. Our typical hive inspection is like 15 seconds. One frame, brood comb from the center of the upper box. We have 2 boxes, but you don't have to look through every comb. Most of the defensive bees will be in the lower box. We rarely go into the lower box. It's okay to blow on the nurse bees to get them to move away so you can look for eggs. But if you were at the entrance of a hive and looking at a guard bee, probably not a great idea to put mammal breath on that guard bee. Then watch the bees. Are they watching you? Are they responding to your movements? Watch their wings. Are they agitated at all? That will tell you that they're getting up their defensiveness. If they're giving you warning bumps, just little bumps, you go, wow, yeah, they're just bumping off my arms. Slow down. And then really smell for alarm pheromone. It's only the guards that follow your movements. If they're looking at you, they're aware of you. So white smoke, get it ready. Before you ever open, before I ever crack anything, I always get my smoker a puff to make sure there's white smoke coming out. You don't want to open the hive and then find out you got gray smoke. Okay? So I would never touch the frames of this comb yet. There's too many bees out there that are not turned around. A little bit of smoke, they start to go away, Now I'm finally ready to pull out a comb. I would not touch it until it gets to this point. Okay, and again, alarm for everyone, pause your work, slow down. Shaking bees off the combs doesn't elicit defensive behavior at all. I do this all day long. Boom, big cloud of bees all around and everything like that. Lots of noise. There's zero stinging. That's not defense at all. They're just confused when they fly out. The old bees fly out, the young bees stay in the tub. Okay, hive inspection. You are the aggressor. The bees are the defenders. Don't make them think that they have to defend themselves from you. But the bees are never the aggressors. You are the aggressor. They are the defenders. And it was mentioned, I think, by Andy, learning to work colonies, start with small colonies. Get some nukes, get some weak nukes, and get into them every couple of days. Be out there every day. Learn on very small colonies. They're non-defensive. We, on Saturdays in April, we'll sell maybe 250 nukes a day. There's a line of cars coming by, and my sons say, are you a beginner or are you experienced? I'm a beginner. Okay, we take a nuke from this side. I'm experienced, we'll take a nuke from this side. We'll give the new beginners a very weak nuke. We'll give the experienced ones a strong nuke, because we're doing a disservice to the beginners if you give them a strong nuke, because a strong nuke in a week is going to be huge, because all the brood's going to emerge. And it's too hard for them to learn. So start with very small nukes and learn handling technique. Large colonies, when they're full of bees, are less forgiving. They're and scary for a beginner to work. Don't do that. So yeah, here we are. We just delivered a load of nukes. We deliver truckloads of nukes for beginners. And you know, if somebody says, we'll open it up, say, oh, this one looks, you don't want this one, it's too strong. And we'll tell them that. So here's Stephanie, my ex, asked her to do a little demonstration. So first, come and look at the entrance. So I was at a 4-H class, and they said, okay, well, can you show us how to work bees? I said, well, first, we walk in front and take a look. And I go, look, as I walk in, I go, okay, so this one's got chalk brood. This one is queen right. This one just swarmed. This one has a varroa problem. This one, and I walking by, and they go, how the hell do you tell all those things? I said, learn to look at the front of the entrance, and you can diagnose a lot of problems and conditions before you ever open the hive. How do you tell a colony just swarmed? How can I tell that just by walking by? A dead virgin queen on the ground. Colony just formed. Okay, one of the sisters that emerged died. Okay? Okay, nectar flow on. Bees coming back with their abdomens full of nectar. Look at the abdomens. This colony is going to be gentle as pussycats. When they're on a full honey flow, they're not interested in defending. If they're coming back with their abdomens short, then they're coming back dry. They're going to be much more defensive. See if there's any guards on duty. If there's bees guarding and greeting each incoming bee, they're going to be more defensive than when there's not. You can wave your hands, see if they follow your movements. Then a little bit of smoke to the guards, okay? Stop them from guarding. Now, be aware that colonies inhale and exhale at the same time. If you come up and you put the smoke on the exhalation side, it blows out. It makes a great show for anybody watching you because they see smoke, but if you see the smoke, it didn't go into the hive, okay? So go to the other side. Now when you put smoke, it gets sucked in. So be aware that you're actually doing something with your smoke. It's not about the show you put on outside. It's what actually gets into the hive. A small amount of smoke that gets sucked in does way better than a cloud of smoke that does not go into the hive. Okay, now after you lift the cover, I get it up about 3/4 inch, and you want to put a puff of smoke in right there, one strong puff of smoke. That cover then spreads the smoke out evenly and goes right down between the frames at the top and changes the behavior of any guards that are on the periphery of the colony. So the last thing I would ever do is want to pick up a lid, look at all those unsmoked bees, and then look for my smoker. Smoke them before you ever take the lid off. Again, if the guards are looking at you, they're aware of you. Turn their heads around. Be aware of the wind. I see this all the time. People put the show on. Any smoke that you see is a show for others to look at. Whether it touched the bees, affected the bees, depends on whether it contacted them. So the wind was blowing in this direction here. So all these bees got turned around. Those bees never smelled any smoke at all. Don't think because you put on the show, you actually affected the bees' behavior. So you can look to see if there's any response to hand motion. Then use all your senses. Listen, smell, feel. When I'm working with a bunch of beginners, and I'll have like, maybe 20 of them working nukes all around me, I'll be yelling behind my back, "You pulled that frame out too fast. Oh, you're dragging the bottom there. Listen to what you're doing." They go, "How can you tell, Randy?" I got my ears listening. I can tell from 20 feet away how you're doing in that hive, okay? Use all your senses. Now, you don't want to roll bees on burr comb when you pick up a frame. So if I'm going to pick up this frame, any burr comb sticking out this way from the adjacent frames, I call queen killers. Because as you pick that frame up, these burrs are going to roll down, and you pull out, and there's the queen with their guts hanging out. You want to try to avoid ever seeing one of your queens with their guts hanging out from you rolling over a burr. So you cut not the burr comb on the frame you're lifting, but on the two adjacent frames. Just a quick slice. Okay, now you guys have different hives. I don't know how you could stand it with those frame spacers. I like to slide all my hives. I mean slide all 10 to one side or to the other, or 5 apart, or 4 each way so I can get a center one. You guys are unable to do that. I think you're making beekeeping much harder for yourselves by doing that. So we always want to have 3/4 of an inch total clearance. I can split it for 3/8 on either side. So I have room to pull the comb out, the first comb, without rolling bees. Get a good grasp on the end bars. I want your fingers go down below the wood, no little fingertip grips. And you always grip them like this. You grab it, the end bars like this, and you lift up, and then you put this finger underneath the end bars. That way, if you have a bee buzzing on your fingers, you can let go, and it doesn't drop the frame. So learn how to do this technique. Just hold the frame like this and do this. Let go, grab on, move your middle finger. Learn how to go back and forth very easily. So the first frame comes out very, very slowly. That's the most important frame, to move very, very slowly, your first disturbance. And then beginners just always drag the bottom. And I hear that roar, and I go, "You just rolled the damn queen, dude. What are you doing?" Be careful on that last inch. Get that completely clear. And then I suggest one time you put a puff of smoke down in the cavity of the first frame you pull out. That really helps a lot. Look immediately for the queen. What I found statistically is 50% of the time the queen is on the side of a frame facing you, and 50% of the time she's on the side of the frame facing away from you. I got the data if you want to go over it. So for the first couple of seconds, the queen stands up higher out than the workers, so it's easy to spot. So if I want to look for a queen, I'll pull a frame out of the hive, and I'll go and spread the frames and look down, and I'll spot the queen just looking down like that very, very quickly. Okay, so you have just make a few seconds, less than 10, to easily spot the queen because she's standing higher. Then she drops down, moves around, and then it's much harder to spot the queen. So you can see the queen right there. So I often spot the queen on the next comb. Now, I never leave gaps anywhere in the frames. Now, again, if you don't have your spacers on there, beekeepers leave gaps in there, and then the bees cluster up, and then when you squeeze your frames together, you wind up crushing bees. So I only have a single gap at any time. And then when if I have a double deep or a super on there, when I'm picking it up, I don't even get that high. Just as soon as I get my smoker in there, I get a puff of smoke as you're lifting it. If you're lifting up and you start pulling up the frames due to burr comb like this, that's a disaster. The bees hate that. So I put my hive tool at an angle here, and you shear the upper box to the side, and you'll go, boom. And at that point, you've broken all the burr comb sideways. Then you lift it up, and you don't lift the bottom frame. So that little sideways shear is a really good trick for if you feel any resistance when you're lifting up. Don't put anything in front of the hive. We were out in the yard the other day and put a lid leaning up near the front of the hive, and all the returning bees come back, and there's a disruption of the landmarks of their hive. They know something's wrong. That puts them into the defensive mode. So you don't ever lean anything or put any change in front of the hive. Now, if you want to look for eggs, if you want to look for fecal deposits from varroa mites, if you want to look for American foulbrood scale, you got to have the light coming over your shoulder. The sun has to be directly behind you. Now, if you go to look for the sun, when you find it, you've just blinded yourself. You can't see a damn thing. okay? So instead, look at the ground for your shadow of your head. If you're facing the shadow of your head, and I can draw you a diagram if you need to grasp this, the sun will always be directly behind you, okay? So if you see the shadow of your head in front of you, that means the sun is behind you. If you're in a shady area and there's sunspots on the ground, make sure that this picture right here is in a sunspot. That means you will have enough sun to see eggs in there. So you don't have to look around. Just look at the shadow on the ground. That'll tell you everything you need to know where the light is going to be. And then work quickly. Our hive inspections are very, very quick. You're in, you're out, you know what you're looking for, and find it and close them up, and the bees hardly even notice that you've been there. If they ball up on a frame, you don't want to shove that in with a ball of bees, so just shake them off. Shaking them off doesn't bother them in any way. And try to avoid crushing bees, especially if you're using the Hoffman self-spacing frames. Very easy to crush them there. A general rule of thumb is to try to avoid crushing the queen bee, okay? And beginners are just the number of queens that beginners kill. Just in my beginners classes, I come back to all the nukes I've worked the day before, and I'll often find 25% of the queens killed by a single inspection by the beginners. It's just amazing how many queens, and they're trying so carefully, but there's tricks. Here's a big trick right here. If you're using Hoffman self-spacing frames, don't put a frame down and then push it sideways to close the gap. Line up the spacers right here, because if you put it down, the queen will often be running around the end bars, and when you shove it over, you can catch the queen and kill her then. So line up the end bars and slowly go down, and that prevents crushing a queen between the frames. Okay, if I'm going to be combining bees to a hive, I'm going to be doing anything rough, any kind of major manipulation in the hive. If you go to a colony and you spot the queen and poke her in the butt, you can try this experiment. If she starts running, her bees will often jump her and they may sting her to death. Their own mother, just from you making her run. So when there's disturbances, and I know I'm going to disturb the colony, I always carry little queen cages in my pocket. You just put the queen inside there, pick a green leaf, piece of grass, put it in there, make a light plug, and either put her on the combs or in your pocket. If you are over 60 and have a bad memory, probably in your pocket's not a good idea. Put her to the side in a safe place. When you're done, then just press that comb with that little bit of green leaf in there. Not a hard plug, just a light plug, just enough that you're waiting for the green leaf to wilt, and then the bees will pull it out, release the queen after you're gone. That's a good way to prevent queen loss when you're doing rough work on them. And then be very careful if you taste honey. I can't tell you how many times I've been stung in the mouth, and I go, God, this honey tastes really spicy. Kind of have a burning, it kind of burns me. And then you realize, can you look in here? And they go, oh yeah, we'll get the stinger out of your gum. Anyway, very easy. When I was, years ago, a young Russian guy showed up to buy some nukes, and I said, oh man, we got the star thistle honey, which is really tasty. You know, you should taste it. And I go like this, and he grabs my arm and goes, no, don't do that. When he was a kid, he was working with an apprenticing older Russian beekeeper. The older guy did this, put it in, and instead of it stinging him in the mouth, the guy inhaled it, went down his windpipe and stung him in the windpipe, and the kid watched him asphyxiate and die before his eyes. We have really traumatized him, so be careful. It's very easy all the time, between here and your mouth, for a bee to land. So always look carefully just before you put it in your mouth. Big tip.
Randy, you were talking about swarms and putting your hands in, which is something I do as well.
Yeah.
I've been told that if you feel in, there'll be a hard knot inside where the queen is. I've never been able to pull a queen out of a swarm. Have you ever managed that?
I haven't tried that, but there generally is a knot. I had one swarm, a very large swarm once, that actually moved from tree to tree. And as it moved, it would drop out walnut-sized balls, each with a virgin queen in them. I picked up 7 different balls of virgin queens and started successfully 7 different nucleus colonies from them, and we still had a monster swarm at the other end. One year I was taking swarms, and then on large swarms, I'd shake them through a queen excluder to remove any queens, and then I could make package bees to sell. The most I got, the number of queens out of one swarm was 18. 18 queens in one swarm. So swarms will combine and have virgins and old queens and all that. And yes, they will have knots in there, but I've never tried to reach in and take a queen out.
That's your challenge.
Oh, thank you. I'll often, when a swarm is landing, quick grab my queen cage and go over and watch and then pluck it off the landing swarm. I do that all regularly.
I just looked up the Californian weather. I'm curious about the lids that you have on your boxes. So
You're curious about what on my boxes?
The lids.
The lids, okay.
So you have a vertical strip, a flat, and a vertical strip, but no side strips. We seem to get an incursion of water or the lids get blown off. But you have no protection on the sides. Do you have problem with ingress of water?
Yeah, that's called a migratory cover as opposed to a telescoping cover. So if you are a migratory beekeeper, do you guys say migratory or migratory here? You just say migratory? Okay, Australia is migratory. Okay, so migratory beekeepers, the telescoping covers, you can't put 6 hives across on a truck. So our covers are the same width as the beehive. So typically 3/4 of an inch thick of wood, and then you have the lips at the end. Now, we put our hand grip 1/8 inch below that lip on the end. So we can put our hive tool in that space and pull a hive tool sideways, use leverage, and it pops the lid up. Now, there would be leakage if you break the propolis seal. So what we do is when we put our lid back on, you push down warm, hard, and that reseals the propolis, so there's no water leakage at all. If I'm in cold weather and I have to break open a hive, I will often carry a torch with me, propane torch, and before I put that lid back on, I'll go around, warm up that propolis, push it down, and get the seal back again. But if you have top ventilation, there's no sense in trying to make the propolis seal, because you've already screwed it all up anyway, right? So there's no reason if you have a top vent to worry about the propolis seal if you've already got top ventilation.
How do you get the white smoke? What do you put in your smoker to get that white smoke rather than the grey smoke?
It's not the type of smoke, it's the temperature that it's burning at. So you need to have embers inside warm enough to burn. And loading a smoker is a whole other subject. We don't have time to go over it now. Any kind of material will work, but you have to get that bed of embers underneath. If there's humidity is high, and that's going to be your problem here, you have high humidity, it's much harder to keep getting a smoker going with high humidity on your smoker fuel. Dry fuel works much, much better. So you guys will have to have a larger bed of embers, and then don't pack your smoker fuel so tight that you don't get thermosiphoning. To keep that fuel burning, it has to have enough oxygen. So it has to have enough air passage to your fuel above that when you put your smoker down, you see smoke coming out continuously. If there's not smoke coming out continuously, you've packed your smoker too tight, there's no thermosiphoning, starves those embers for oxygen, and the smoker will go out. So you have to make sure that you pack it just the right density that when you put it down, the heat from those embers will cause a thermosiphon, which will bring oxygen to the bottom and keep those embers going. So when you pick it up again. How's that for a quickie physics?
Thanks very much.
I use water spray, thinking that is better for the bees. I notice you only use smoke. Am I doing it wrong?
There's no right or wrongs in beekeeping. You do whatever makes you happy. We have not found that the water has the same effect as the smoke. Okay?